Hello out there. We're going to get started in a minute or so. Most of you are seated already, so I guess the only one allowed to stand is our photographer over here. So I'd just like to welcome everybody. I hope you enjoyed the extra social hour we didn't plan, but it seemed to work out. Anyway, we also want to welcome, I guess I want to welcome the folks who are joining us online. I'm not sure you got the message about when things were started today, but we're on a bit of a reduced schedule because one of our speakers wasn't feeling well and decided not to contaminate the rest of us. And so we only got one speaker today. The other thing I want to remind the folks who are joining us online, when we get to the question answer part of the presentation, you can send your questions by email to UMRA at umich.edu, and we have somebody monitoring that email group so your questions can get into the discussion today. I have to look at my cheat sheet to know what else I'm supposed to say here. Unfortunately, I left my glasses in my car. Oh, I can barely read this one too. I think I did a reminder last time about silencing your cell phone so we don't interrupt the speaker. So if you could take a minute to do that before our first speaker, that's fine. But no, I'll struggle through it. Thanks, Patty. Oh, I know. I'm supposed to remind you about the UMRA swag. This is I'm wearing one of the original shirts, I think, that are no longer available, but we do have a new arrangement with Rally House, and on their website you can find a selection of sweatshirts, T-shirts, coffee mugs, and the like. So if you aren't aware of that, you should be able to find us on Rally House. And Sandy, I think, if do you have any other information you want me to share about that? And now you got a microphone, so you have to say it again.
Sorry. They originally opened it with only Antigua product, which is a very nice line but high end, and now they've added Champion product to it. So it's been increased in possible purchases since then. And
Thank you.
Do you have the website? You could bring it up.
I don't.
You don't.
But is it easy to find if you get to the Rally House
No.
thing, or a little bit tricky to get to it? Maybe we could put the link in the newsletter so people can find it.
I was informed that the instructions are on the UMRA website.
I'll still have it go in the newsletter. I find it easier to use that. Anyway, they're on the website if you're adventurous for that, and we'll see if we can get it in the newsletter as well. I wanted to point out a few things on the side table over here. The write a cheery note that people who've been here before are familiar with the cards that are available to sign that get sent. So if you have some time to fill out a card while you're here, Meals on Wheels, I think, is the primary recipient, but maybe others as well. So please do that. And we're not going to have a SIG update today, so our introduction is going to be shorter. But there is a place where you can sign up for our shared interest groups right next to the cheery note on the table as well. And then finally is travel opportunities, but we have somebody to say a few words about that. So Carol.
Well, thank you.
Oh, I didn't put the mic
That's
down.
okay. I'm used to doing this. Hi, everybody. So as you can see, we have a lot going on. I was just bemoaning the fact that we haven't gotten October, November, and December scheduled up yet, but we meet next month, so I'm hoping that I'll have new things for you, including the new things I'm going to tell you about today. So it's March. It's going to snow next week. So April, April 16th, we're going to the play Rent in Dexter at the Encore Theater. April 23rd, we have a new event. The ISR, Institute for Social Research, has invited UMRA to come to their building on Thompson between 3:30 and 5:30 on the 23rd of April. And they're doing a presentation on all the research they've been doing related to aging. So they thought we'd all be very interested in that. They're going to actually serve us coffee and cookies. And then there will be tables around the room, as you see here, where the researchers themselves will be sitting to talk to you specifically about the individual research they've been doing. So that's April 23rd at the ISR down on Thompson. You can, Ed, bless his heart, already put it onto the events calendar, so you can already sign up. And this was at 8 o'clock last night, so that I found out about it. 3:30 to 5:30 on the 23rd of April. That way you'll be able to use your retirees passes to park free. So that's the other thing that's important, very important. April 30th, Al is holding the third M City tour. He needs a few more people to sign up for that in order to make it happen. Then on May 21st, as we talked about last month, we have the opportunity to go. Hold on, to the Gerald Ford Presidential Library to hear the Queen and her presidents, the hidden hand that shaped history. Queen Elizabeth met with many presidents and really made a lot of changes in the way things were done, I think, just in her interactions, as many of you know what she was like. So that's at what time, Pat?
It's now at 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
But I will email everyone who has signed up about the changes, and her flyer is not yet out. So the book, The Queen, by
Susan Page, author of the book of the same title, which is The Queen and Her Presidents, The Hidden Hand That Shaped History.
And that will be at Barnes & Noble, he said, on the 14th of April.
Okay.
If anybody wants to get the book and read it.
So the book is going to be available starting this Saturday at Barnes & Noble, if you're interested in that.
But I understand they can handle up to 200, and I asked Tara Brock from the president of the Ford Library if we could then register, if we get to our maximum of 35, people can call in and get online and register if they haven't gotten into our group.
So we have a group of 35 spots reserved, but after the 35 are filled, you can still get in because they can hold quite a few more people. So I think that one's going to be very interesting. May 25th, we're going to Meadowbrook. As most of you know, that's sold out. And that's got a little bit of a waiting list if anybody's interested. But again, May 25th. Belle Isle, June 18th. That has a long waiting list. It has sold out as well. June 30th, we're going to the Mud Hens down in Toledo. We're going to, who are we playing? Iowa Cubs. The trip is including transportation. The first time we went to the Mud Hens, we carpooled and decided early on that we wanted to take a bus. So it includes transportation and lunch, hot dog. Other things are available, obviously, at the stadium as well. The Tigers game is July 29th versus the Orioles, and Al will have more information about that. Just if you want to go to a Tigers game, it's a great event. We do have transportation provided, and it's fun. We're sitting under a sheltered area. Camp Michiganey is coming up then at the end of September. So we don't usually do something in August. We actually don't usually do things in the middle of the summer either, but we don't usually do things in August. There will be the welcome picnic, though, that'll occur at some point. Someone will give me a date. or let you all know. The Camp Michigania is September 26th to the 29th. And then Stratford, which is the 14th to the 16th of October. Now, the flyer's been changed. So if you picked one up before, go pick up another one because there's now two sides to it. Al has arranged to have someone provide us with all kinds of information. There's a post-show chat and all other kinds of things, including things to see in Stratford. So it's a two-sided flyer now. We do need about 10 more people to sign up in order to make it a go. And the registration deadline is April 8th. So if there's any thoughts that you want to go, please join us because I think it's going to be a great trip. Questions? Okay, well, I hope we'll see many of you on our trips.
Thank you, Carol. And at this time, I'd like to invite our sponsors who wish to say hello and maybe spend a minute on what they do for a living. I have you come up now. Whoever gets here first gets the mic first. You're in the lead. You say you're in the lead.
Yes. Yes, I got top spot. Hi, everyone. My name is Jem Petty. I'm from Silver Maples of Chelsea. We are a vibrant retirement community out in Chelsea. I have a really quick quiz for you just because I have a lot of people being like, oh, I'm too young. I don't want to join the waitlist. We have a long wait list, so pre-plan. But what age do you think our oldest resident is currently? 105? 101, 103. Yeah, good age. What about our youngest resident currently? Anyone got some guesses? 64 and a half? I feel like I want a prize for you. Come to the back table and I'll give you one of our little baggies because she is 64. So very good. So you're never too young. Please pre-plan. Come chat to me at the back table if you have any questions. I'd love to chat to you more. Thanks so much, everyone.
Hey everyone, my name's Daniel. I'm with Fidelity. I know you missed me last time because I was at a wedding in Houston. I wasn't getting married, but I was just visiting. So, you probably already know what Fidelity does, but if you don't, you can always come chat with us in the back table. So we do retirement planning and we assist, of course, through the University of Michigan. But I also want to take this time and say that we do have an upcoming Fidelity Day in partnership with the Museum of Arts, May 12th. It's Tuesday. We will have free events and some light refreshments throughout the day, but we also will have a limited seating event where we'll go over charitable giving and estate planning. When that registration link becomes available, I will share that with y'all. Just wanted to make you aware for the future. Thanks.
All these tall people. I am Kathy with Care Management by Natalie. We are a private care management company, can help with household management or medical management or both, depending on what somebody needs. And on a side note, this is just me putting on my Senior Living Week hat. We have the save the dates for Senior Living Week for this year. It's this fall. I have these postcards on my table, so please come grab one and share them with your friends. Great opportunity to have a lot of vendors all in one place to ask questions to, and it's all day. Kicks off with the expo, and then the week after is open houses and educational opportunities. Thank you.
Hello, Lucas Dimitrovich from Bank of Ann Arbor. Just wanted to remind everyone, Sonic Lunch, the announcement of the schedule will be coming very soon. So please come out and join us on Thursdays in the summer. Should be starting the first Thursday of June, and spend some time with us.
Hi, hello, I'm Phil Hollander with Two Bird Wealth Strategies. We're that office off of Dixboro and Plymouth Road. Whether you're early into retirement or very seasoned into retirement, we can work with you just to help give that second set of eyes, make sure what you're doing is what's best for what is personal to you, what your goals are, and if there's pivots you need to do, we can help provide that second set of eyes. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda. I'm with EHM Senior Solutions, and I'm here in place of Julie, who you've probably met before, to help represent Life Choices. So, our Life Choices program is a membership program for adults 50 and over who are looking to be proactive about their long term care needs. We do have a Dine and Discover event coming up in April. So, if you want to know more about our program, stop by our table. I have flyers about that. So, thank you.
Well, good afternoon. Scott Wired, Horizons Planning Corporation. We also are financial advisors and willing to consult with you on anything regarding your financial life. And we spend a lot of time talking with you before we ever get to the point of talking about charging. So feel free to use us, abuse us, get to know us. To that end, I'm going to work backwards on 3 dates. Our annual shred date, I told you last month, but I actually have handout reminders for you this month. It's Monday, April 20th. That's the Monday after tax day if you're working on your calendar. I'm probably going to have to leave before the presentation's over, but I'll leave these flyers on the table over here to the side. So pick one up. It'll be a handy reminder. Prior to Monday, April 20th, you need to deal with April 15th. That is your tax filing deadline date. And if you're still going through things and still not sure what to keep and what to get rid of, we did bring copies of the document storage chart. This is just handy for you to refer to about how long do I need to keep this? Do I need to keep this? Do I need to shred it? Whatever, feel free to help yourself with that. And then third on my list for today is probably the preeminent date you need to remember, which hopefully is a series of dates starting with tomorrow at noon, Michigan men's basketball. Go blue.
And last but not least here, I wanted to give an opportunity for any new members or first-time attendees to one of these meetings to introduce themselves. I'm told that that's why the balloons are at the round table. So I'm guessing if we have any, that's where they are.
Somebody needs to stand up. Come on. They told me you're new.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Shannon Xiao. Actually, my legal name is Xia Xiao if you want to practice Chinese. But I figured it's pretty difficult, so you can just call me Shannon. I just retired in December from radiology, but I don't know most people from radiology because I'm a chemist. We work in a different building. We make a radio tracer deliver to hospital for patient to do the PET image. Yeah, thank you.
Nobody else? Raise a hand. Hold it up.
Maybe I don't need a
No.
microphone.
Our online people can hear you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Tanya. My husband is Jack. I'm the one that worked for Michigan Medicine. I worked at Mott. I am a nurse. I understand there's a lot of nurses here. So, yeah. Yeah, I worked in the neonatal ICU in Mott, and it was a great career. You're welcome. Yeah, we live in Jackson. Our kids are obviously all adults, and we have grandkids, and we're just so excited to be part of this group. So thank you for the nice welcome.
Looks like there may be one more. Roger, you're going to twist some arms?
I'm trying to twist an arm. It could even be first timers here. I don't care.
My name's Carol Welsh. I think this might be the second time I've been here since I officially retired for good, but I worked for 25 years in the social work department as a clinical social worker. And when I retired from that, at that point, 3 days a week, I took an appointment to work 1 day a week in the geriatric center about 9 years ago, and I retired from that in October 25th. And that was a wonderful experience. So now I'm adapting to retirement life. Thank you.
I think that might be it. Thank you, Roger, for running around the room. Uh, we're not going to have a short break today. We're going to go right to the speaker. So I'm going to invite Pat Shields up to introduce Scott Page.
I don't have a strong voice. Can you hear me? Great. Thank you. So raise your hand. You don't have to yell at me, but if I drift off, if my voice drifts off, just wave at me, right? So I have to say that this is an incredible pleasure to introduce Scott Page to you. Relationship goes way back to playing basketball at the Y. And then he was he was on the committee for our son's graduate PhD dissertation, and Colin still is very appreciative of all that he's done. I've seen several of his presentations and also saw the PowerPoint. He did the Saturday morning physics talk, and he had like 200 slides. And he said, I've got 200 slides, but I promise you we'll be done in time. Well, this one I think has 81 or 82, Scott, but I promise you he'll be done in time to do questions and answers. So Scott is the John Seeley Brown Distinguished University. Yep. Yep.
Talking to the mic, please.
Okay. I've got to get the paper in front of me to do that. So Scott is the John Seeley Brown Distinguished University Professor of Complexity, Management, and Social Science at the University of Michigan, and external faculty member at the Santa Fe Institute and external fellow at the Brookings Institute. He is an elected fellow at both the American Academy of Arts and Science and the National Academy of Sciences. He is a winner of the Guggenheim Fellowship, multiple NSF awards, as well as grants from the MacArthur Foundation, the McDonnell Foundation, DARPA, as well as the U.S. Air Force. He has spoken at Davos, the Aspen Ideas Festival, and hundreds of other business agencies, universities. His teaching awards, and this is a long list, includes faculty teaching at Caltech, Outstanding Teaching Assistant Award at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and Northwestern University, and the Faculty Achievement Award here. Professor Page studies collective intelligence, the role of the diversity in markets, organizations, and democracies. No hands, good. And institutional design and culture. He is the author of more than 100 academic articles and 5 books, including The Difference, which was recently re-released as a Princeton classic. Let's see. I think that's enough. It's a pleasure to welcome Scott. Thank you for coming. And I have to leave. We've got basketball games to go to. So you're in good hands with Scott. Thank you. So I moved the thing.
Okay, no, we're good, I think. All right, let's see if I can go back. Is that what you do? Uh-oh, we're okay, there we go. It's great to be here. And as Patrick mentioned, I've been a Michigan faculty for a long time, since right before 2000, when I explained to my undergrads, I just got done teaching 3 hours of undergraduate classes about Y2K. They always think I'm joking, right? That like our computers weren't rounding past 0. They're like, yeah. But I was an undergraduate here. I came in 1981, so 45 years ago, from Yankee Springs, Michigan, which isn't a town, but it is a township, so close enough. And it was, the great honor of my life is to be able to come back here to the university. My wife is also a Michigan graduate, Jenna Bednar. She's on the faculty here in political science and public policy, and she's run all the democracy stuff at the university for the last few years. So what I want to talk today is about a little bit about kind of like 3 pivots that have been going on at the same time at the university. So for a long time, we've had this interest in diversity. Recently, we've pivoted a bit towards civic engagement. And then you also know that there's been a lot of interest in AI. And these are kind of all places in which I've been kind of played kind of intellectual roles, if not, although in some cases also more bureaucratic administrative roles. But to get started, I just want to call out one of my colleagues, Mark Newman. I came here, I was hired in complex systems as our kind of our first official hire in complex systems. And Michigan was one of the universities that really got this field started. And when I got hired, they said, we had one hire and we hired you, no pressure. And I said, well, you've made your first mistake. You should have hired Mark Newman. And the beauty of the University of Michigan is they're like, wait, who's Mark Newman? And they didn't know. So we brought Mark Newman in and they said, you're right. We should have hired Mark Newman. And so I often get introduced, and like the person who hired me said the best decision I ever made at the University of Michigan was hiring Scott Page, and that's because he hired Mark Newman. And so Mark won another big prize this week. Mark is also, like me, a distinguished university professor, but he won the John von Neumann Prize, and I bring this up because John's daughter, Marina Whitman, was on the faculty here for a long time as well. So we're all sort of a big club. So what I want to do is I'm going to talk about kind of 3 things. I want to talk about the case for diversity writ large. Why has the University of Michigan made this big argument for diversity? And when I say diversity writ large, I mean not just identity diversity. I mean disciplinary diversity, right? I mean background, all sorts of things. And the writ large thing there's a bit of a joke. As I mentioned, I'm from Yankee Springs, Michigan, so our family chat, I can bring it up, but I at one point said the phrase writ large. And so like our family chat is called Page family writ large. So the good thing about being a professor is you can just take it from your family for the rest of your life. Then I'll talk about some of this recent, hundreds of schools have launched what they call dialogue across difference. And I'm going to be critical of that, right? One of the things that we have is academic freedom, and I'm going to argue that we could do better. Maybe we should go back to where we were before in diversity. And then just because it intersects with this, I'll talk a little bit about AI, because one of the things that's really fascinating about AI, if you take a kind of cognitive view of it, like how does AI think and how does it think differently than we do, I think it gives you kind of a different lens. So I want to start out by talking about cognitive diversity, and here's why it's so important. The economy now, when I was an undergraduate here, we made things. Michigan made trucks, cars, those sorts of things. We were primarily a manufacturing economy, not just a state, but the entire nation. And now we think, right? Now most people do what they call non-routine cognitive work. So most people go to work every day and they think in teams. And one of the really puzzling things, if you look at team performance, it doesn't look like a bell curve, right? If you look at human heights, it looks like a bell curve because you're adding up a bunch of stuff. And if you add up a bunch of things, you get a bell curve. But teams are really, really good, right? So you get like, Michigan down here, very, very good. And then like Ohio State way over there, not so good. And so the question is like, what is it that makes teams so fantastic? And I think the real challenge here is if you look at the teams that are the very best, they're diverse. If you look at the teams that are in the middle, all the Bs and the B pluses, they're homogeneous. Everybody looks the same, trained the same place, that sort of stuff. And look at the teams that are the worst, they're also diverse. And so the challenge is then, how do we manage, how do we compose, how do we think about diverse teams when they're kind of the best, quote Dickens, kind of the best and the worst of times. So when you think about diversity, what we think about is not necessarily what it looks like on the outside, but we're thinking about like what we look on the inside. So what information do we have? What knowledge? What heuristics? Like what tricks do we use? How do we represent the world, right? What causal models do we keep in our head? And so what we can think of, and there's just kind of overwhelming evidence that this is the case, is that what we're trained in, what our experiences are, right, affect how we see the world and what we know. And the idea is all those differences in how we think about things lead to better outcomes, right? Now, for a long time, there's been kind of an empirical question: to what extent does identity diversity play that same role, right? So how do differences in who we are relate to cognitive diversity? And when I was an undergrad, and probably for like 30, 40 years, there was a lot of research, and a lot of it done here actually, kind of asking like, do we see differences in gender, race, ethnicity, social class in terms of what knowledge people have or how they represent the world and what causal models they have. And to be absolutely blunt, not huge effects, not big differences. But then in the last 5, 10 years, we've realized, maybe even 15, that you have to look at kind of the whole bundle. So you have to sort of say, Scott Page, former Methodist, current Episcopalian, right? Grew up a hillbilly, male, 63 years old, bundle all that stuff together, and then you actually do get a lot of predictive value about kind of what I think, what I know. And this is why the internet can like send you exactly what you want, right? Because now we have so much information, they know exactly, what music I'll like and that sort of thing. Now, what's interesting about this is great minds sometimes do think alike, but great teams don't. And this is some work by my friend Catherine Phillips, where she had people read this whodunit, and then she put together people who thought about it kind of the same way and thought about people who thought about it differently and put them in teams. And of course, the diverse teams did better. But then she had people bet money on how good they thought their teams were, right? And it turned out that when you do that, the homogeneous groups think they're better. And this is one of the real challenges about diversity research and diverse teams, because people will say, well, I was on a diverse team and that was kind of lousy. But the thing is, the experience itself isn't necessarily great, right? Because you're being challenged, but that's what we're here for, right? That's why we're bringing in these undergraduates, to have their ideas challenged and to have them become better at what they do. So how do we think about this? So academics, there's 2 types of academics. There's lumpers and there's splitters, right? So the lumpers are like, everything's about power. So they've got like one concept and they apply it everywhere. Splitters kind of break things down. And so when you take something like, and you want to say that diversity is going to make groups better, right? That's too lumpy. So what we have to do is you have to ask, what is it that the group is actually doing? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple particular things. So I'm going to talk about prediction first. And this is sometimes called the wisdom of crowds. And the famous example here is the 1806 West of England Fat Stock and Poultry Exhibition, where 787 people guessed the weight of a steer. Now, this graphic was made for me by a Michigan undergraduate, and I was presenting this to the deans of all of the veterinary schools in America, like 200 deans, and the Michigan State dean's hand goes straight up. She goes, Scott, that is not a steer. And I said, I'm a theorist. Close enough. But the amazing thing about this story is the average guess was 1197, and the steer weighed 1198. So this is this famous example. But the thing is, it's an anecdote. So we're not going to run the university. We're not going to make our investment decisions based on anecdotes. But there's literally hundreds of years of evidence showing that crowds make better predictions than individuals on average. And you can actually unpack that in a very serious way, right? And what you can show is that the crowd's error, like how far off the crowd is, equals the average error of the people in the crowd minus the diversity in their predictions. And this looks complicated, but it's actually quite easy. If the true answer is 50 and everybody guesses 50, and everybody guesses 60, everybody's off by 10 and the crowd's off by 10, right? Because there's no diversity. But if some people say 60 and some people say 40, then on average you're going to get to 50 and you're going to be right? So what you want then is you want kind of smart, diverse people. So if you plug that into this, you get this, that they're off by 1, but these are squared terms. So they're off by 1.4 pounds. So when you square it, it's 2. On average, people were off by about 70 pounds, but they were also diverse. And this has been explained by psychologists. There's something called like anchoring and adjustment biases, where people had just weighed their own steers. These weren't people who were like, didn't know anything about cattle. And so they probably anchored from their own steers. And so the diversity here was not diverse training in chemistry and physics or identity. It was they each knew a different cow, right? And the same is true if people guess human heights. People tend to anchor off their own heights. Now, what you can do when we teach this, so Ross has a very active executive teaching program. I've done a lot for a decade. I did stuff with the intelligence community and the New York Fed, European Central Bank. We talk about how do you have a good prediction protocol? What does it look like? And so the first thing you want to do is give people the time and the resources to make their own predictions. So you want to surface that diversity because you want to avoid groupthink. Then you want people to share their models, not their numbers. Like, how did you think about this? Are you thinking about this correctly or not? Then you want to do what you call red teaming, or taking an outside view where you want to challenge those assumptions that other people have. Like, I don't think that's true, right? So we'll see some examples where in a second, but like one person was saying that Texas is 4,000 miles by 3,000 miles. And the rest of the people on our team were like, no, that is not true. Texas is big, but not that big. Then you want to make new models, and then you want to aggregate in some way. So here's some Ross executives. I had them guess the number of Walmarts in Ohio, and the actual number is 150. The crowd estimate, 345, is what they guessed in the first round, kind of like wisdom of crowds guess the way to the steer. But after we did the protocol, their average was 148.6. This is some energy people who did road miles in Texas. So these were people who like thought I said, do you want something hard or easy? They're like hard. So I'm like, okay, let's do road miles in Texas. So road miles, a single lane of a road. And so first, their crowd estimate was 2.8 million. That's the average of the room, which isn't bad. Being out by a factor of 4 on road miles, and I mean, that's freaking impressive, right? It's really impressive. But then after they went through the process, they were at 694K, which is like almost unbelievable. And the third example was not Ross MBAs. This was a travel company in London. For fun, we had them guess the number of people per pub in a county in Wales. Because they're in the travel industry, right? Their life is more fun than other people. And so their average guess was 1134, which isn't bad. It's like, within 50%. I mean, they're only 50% off. But then we did the process and it was 657.6, right? And I was kicking off like a 2-day thing on team performance, and there was this movement to like, we should just go to the pub now. We're done. Like, we can't, there's nothing we can learn at this point. But the point is, this is going to be the kind of key lesson for today that like, these are all very hard problems. No one knows the number of Walmarts in Ohio, road miles in Texas, or people per pub. But people have different ideas, different models, different ways of thinking. We also have errors in our thinking. And so you have to create spaces and opportunities and protocols where people think, surface, challenge, and reaggregate. Now, we can actually talk about important things, and it's too bad Joanna's in here because she's amazing. But Joanne, when you think about talking about the economy, one thing that economists do is make forecasts. So this is 40 years of forecasts. A lot of it comes from Europe, but some from the US. And the crowd is 21% better than the average economist at making predictions. So this is the same thing like guessing the weight of a cattle. But what's fascinating here is like, this is a great graph. So the one here is kind of the error of an average economist. The next line down, the best one. So the very best person in this data set is Abby Cohen from Goldman Sachs. You may have seen on TV, 10 years ago, but she's 10% better than the average economist, which is kind of surprising because if you watched her on TV, you'd think 15% better, but she's only 10% better. But the weird thing is take any 4 economists and you do better than her. Why? Because the economy is an incredibly complex thing, right? And so by averaging their predictions, you're going to do better. Okay. So that's kind of how problem solving works, or prediction works. Now, problem solving is a different kind of thing. So the first thing is when you think about what's going on in problem solving, a lot of this is like, designing new chips, coming up with cures for diseases, this sort of things. There's 4 facts about what's happening in the patent space. So one is knowledge is increasing just so fast. So many more people are part of the knowledge economy that it's hard to even keep track of what's going on. Second, senior people are falling behind. Most of the breakthrough stuff is happening but from younger people. Third thing is teams are just getting larger. And the fourth is that the larger teams are basically having more of an impact. So this is a famous paper by Brian Uzi, Sadam Mukherjee, Michael Stringer, and Ben Jones from Northwestern. And what they show in this paper, which is kind of just spectacular, is if you look at these numbers, 0.14%, this is the percentage of papers that get 100 citations. So for example, like if I'm asked by, Harvard or Stanford or Wharton or Michigan State or Chicago to write a letter for someone like, should Joanne get tenure, right? Or should this person get promoted to full professor? You'll pull up Google Scholar and you'll look at their papers and you read their papers and you'll see how often they're cited. And if a paper is cited 100 times, that's considered impactful. So what you see here is team-authored papers are 4.5 times as likely to have this high impact as solo-authored papers. And if you go back to this chart, the way you can explain that is the blue bar is if you co-author with most people tend to co-author with other people who are really, really good. So that's kind of like ability. The red bar is if you co-author with someone who knows different stuff than you know. So are they citing different papers? So you kind of get, so where does the 4.5 come from? One comes from working with people who are good. The other one comes from working with people who are different. And then the big green one is what you get if you work with someone who's good and different. So the 4 basically is 1 comes from good, 1 comes from different, and then another 2 comes from good and different. And I want to be super clear here about this, the work I'm going to show you. This is a draw of 24 million papers from the top research journals. So this isn't 30 people in a lab in 1976 at the University of Illinois where they got $5 at the end of it. This is every single research paper in a top research journal up to 2012. So this is what we would call a fact. Okay. If you look at, this is a new paper that takes a broader swath of academic publications. So the N here, the number of papers is 260 million. Okay, so this is basically anything ever written that has like a ly word in it or something, maybe, who knows. But what you find here is, so they have this notion of what they call structural diversity, which essentially means like if Patrick and I have never written a paper, so Patrick's son and I have never written a paper together or written a paper with the same person. So if Patrick's son wrote a paper with Patrick and I wrote a paper with Patrick, we'd be connected through Patrick. So this just looks at what's the advantage of not being connected, right? And this is a little bit harder to understand, but what you get is you're basically getting 10, 20, 30% increases in the impact of your paper just by working with someone who you don't work with otherwise. Now this could be, I mean, like this is surprising, but it's not. And the reason it's not surprising is take a field like neuroscience. There's 70,000 papers, right, written each year. And so if I work with someone at the University of Michigan, they know the same people, they've read the same journals, they've gone to the same seminars. And so there's this big advantage from working with other people. And you can go deeper. This is other work and look at kind of, does it depend on context or content? And it turns out disciplines matters a lot more than kind of the key words. So you really want to be working across disciplines. So why did Michigan go so big on this? Why did they waste their first hire in complex systems on someone like me doing diversity and not Mark Newman, who they should have hired in his networks? And the reason why is, we put this thing forward all the time, 100 departments in the top 10, right? If those are silos, so what? So what? They're like Christmas ornaments or something. Who cares? This is basically saying to the extent we make these things non-silos, right? We have neuroscientists working with cognitive scientists, working with behavioral scientists, working with clinical scientists, working with economists, working with political scientists. That's why, like, I'm in economics, political science, complex systems in the business school, right? The whole idea is to be having people working across these disciplines to make the world better. Now, if you go deeper into this, and again, 24 million articles, 2.5 million patents, 26,000 projects, I'm just kind of throwing that as eye candy. What you see is the real breakthroughs come from very small groups of people, like, Kahneman and Tversky, the Kurt Curies, right, working hard. And then once they come up with the idea, it's these larger teams with statisticians, network theorists, modelers, all those people, and I'll happily share these slides, who work together to make these breakthroughs. The other thing that's kind of fascinating, and this is the thing that like becomes difficult when you're making these decisions about kind of like who to keep and who not to keep. So you had all these people who do manage financial assets coming up. I spent a lot of time on the LS&A executive committee, and when making tenure decisions, a faculty member is like an asset. You're kind of saying, okay, do we want 30 more years of this person or not? One of our challenges, you see these lines, the lower lines are kind of like the citation evidence, and you're looking at kind of 2 authors, 3 authors, 4 authors, 5 authors as you move across. And what it's the lines are going from 2 years, 5 years to 10 years. So one of the things you see is, notice how the lines, the top line, the slope gets much bigger. For large teams, it typically takes 5 to 10 years for these research that they're doing that's interdisciplinary to actually get a foothold, typically because it's a new idea. And so that means that judgment starts mattering a lot. And so this is where it becomes incredibly important. Kind of this is the whole thing's kind of almost imploding on itself. In order to evaluate whether an interdisciplinary scholar is really good, you actually need a diverse team of people, going back to the weight of the cow, to figure out whether we should keep the person or not. Okay, so how do we think through this? So what does someone like me do other than sit around and like draw on the chalkboard a lot? One thing we do is we think about, okay, well, what does it mean to say a problem's hard? So a very simple way to think about it is like, we think of a simple problem like that one on the top, like Mount Fuji, where you could just kind of follow your nose, right? And you'd find the peak. And we think of harder problems as rugged landscapes where there's kind of lots of peaks, right? And so a problem solver is basically just, they represent the world in some way, and then they have some technique of trying to solve it, and then maybe they solve it or maybe they get stuck. So the theorem that kind of got me into this space is with Lu Hong, a colleague of mine, where I said, look, take a difficult problem, so lots of peaks, take a capable set of kind of capable, diverse problem solvers, create a moderately large team, and what you'll find in a whole bunch of settings is that like randomly selected teams actually do better than the teams of the very best people, right? Which doesn't make sense at first. And if you think in terms of like IQ or cognitive score, you think, okay, I'm taking an alpha group where they're all really good, and then I'm taking this diverse group, which is not so good. And so obviously the alpha group should do better, but that's not what's happening. That's because we're focusing on some metric or some score, not how people actually think. And so this is another, a recent paper on kind of like scientific breakthroughs. You can see like sets of ideas on the top, and then you see this connection that they're saying that connected these two sets of ideas. So what you're looking for is people who combine things that maybe hadn't been combined before. So they have new sorts of ideas. So on the top, you see someone who's thinking, I'm thinking ceramics with fracturing, and that's kind of all in a space that's not that interesting. Whereas this other person is doing genetic algorithms, which are developed here by John Holland, who sort of started the field of complex systems, and linking that to HIV, which is a new link, right? So what you want to think about is, how are people thinking about things? And so when I would go to the New York Fed, I would basically be with my people, right? They were people who were undergrad math majors, PhDs in economics, took a lot of statistics, maybe had some political economy, right? So A is a PhD in economics. B is a master's degree in math. C is master level stats. D might be political economy, and E might be, economic history. And everybody in that room, like if I go to the World Bank or the, European Central Bank, it's like 900 people just like me. So as hard as this is to say, the 901st isn't worth very much, right? Don't tell my wife, but like once you've got 900 of me, 901 isn't worth much. So who's the diverse group? And if you're wondering, wow, is he really just subconsciously trashing the state of Illinois? I am. So like who is, I've got Illinois actually smaller than EZ here, which is kind of harsh. But so what is the IL? So the IL might be an urban sociologist. Now, would I want an urban sociologist setting interest rates? No, probably not. But when I've already got 900 economists all trained in the same way, do I want one person in that room who's an urban sociologist? The answer is yes, right? And that's kind of what drives these results. Now, you can go a little bit deeper on this. So John Kleinberg, who's a Genius Award winner from Cornell, and his student Maithra Raghu, they said, well, look, we took the Hong and Page paper, and we showed that there's actually, you can go a little bit deeper and say on some complex tasks, they define a particular way. If people bring different kind of, ways of thinking, there's no test that you could apply to individuals that would give you the best teams. So people talk about like a meritocracy. A meritocracy makes sense in some settings, but it doesn't make sense if you're solving scientific problems. And so then Lou and I then just last year, so to give you a sense of how the amazing speed at which science proceeds, this paper was 2006, this paper is 2016, this paper is 2026. So every 10 years we do something. But basically, Lou and I last year, just came out this year, showed that like if you have a test applied to individuals, it can only determine the best team if by replacing the worst performer, the team with someone who scores higher would necessarily make the team better. So what that basically means is if you're running a relay race. So if you're running a relay race, you want to pick the 4 fastest people. But if you're doing almost anything else, if you can't map it to a relay race, meritocracy doesn't make sense. I mean, like in the sense of like, there's no test that you could apply and say, okay, these are the 20 people who scored highest. We want these 20 people. Because what you want is people who have you want smart people who have cognitive diversity. And again, this isn't coming from a study with 6 people where it was set up or some little mathematical model. This is Every paper ever written, whether you filter out to the mere 24 million in the top journals or all 260, every patent ever issued by the United States, every GitHub project ever done, every Wikipedia article ever published, same story, different verse, a little bit louder, a little bit worse. Every single time, the answer is ability and diversity. And if it's ability and diversity, there's no test. And so at Michigan, this is why we have lots of, we don't let our undergraduates in by a single score. Okay, so now I'm going to pivot, and I'm going to be a little bit, one of the advantages of tenure is you can criticize your home universities, right? And I have many of them, so I've got lots of targets. But this came out in September. More than 400 colleges and universities have gotten rid of their diversity programs, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, or they've eliminated them or rebranded them. And I got this yesterday in my Wisconsin alumni magazine. And they've got something they call the Wisconsin Exchange. And I realize lots of words on here and violating the etiquettes of slides, but essentially the idea is vigorous discourse, right? That we want discourse, we want civic dialogue, and there's a sense in which what we want to, the subtext in here is every idea here is valuable. So Michigan had a video that all students watched this year called How to Be a Wolverine. And there were 6 of us, there were 6 faculty members who put together this whole video. I was one of the 6, and 4 people kept saying this. And I kept saying, no, we're not going to say that. We're not saying that, because that's not true. Part of the reason we're sending these kids here is to have them learn that maybe their idea isn't right. We're not saying every idea is right, but there are wrong ideas. And we can't have our undergraduates come in and be like, well, let me tell you how the world works, that they're telling us. It's like, no, let's actually learn something, and then we can have a discussion about how the world works. So instead, where we kind of landed on this, that ideas merit respectful engagement, right? So we want to create a psychologically safe place where people share their ideas. Like, I'm going to take the time to listen to you and engage your idea. But then, after I've heard you out, I will respectfully interrogate what you say from multiple diverse frameworks and perspectives and bring it to data, and we'll ask, is there a there? Now that sounds harsh, right, in some ways, and I mean it to, and here's why. Reason number 1, Phil Tetlock wrote this amazing book called Expert Political Judgment, where for 20 years he coded over 10,000 predictions by pundits. And what he found is that ideologues, so people who are, whether it's Al Franken or Rush Limbaugh, are really bad. Like if you code everything they say, they're not very good, left or right. In fact, they're worse than random. So this is coded over thousands of predictions. So what do I mean by worse than random? So if you basically say, I'm going to flip a 3-sided coin, and a third of the time I'm going to say things are going to be worse, a third of the time I'm going to say things are going to be better, a third of the time I'm going to say, I don't know, probably not going to change very much. That's a lot more accurate than MSNBC or Fox News. The reason why? The world is complex, right? And so whether you like it or not, right-wing ideology is not right most of the time. Left-wing ideology is not right most of the time. Each one of them is right some of the time, and then some of the time it's some combination of those two things. And so Tetlock's big takeaway is the people who are actually able to predict the future, and that's why diverse teams work so well, are people who think about, who kind of take it as it comes. And not so, if you, I was just talking to a former student of mine, someone at Stanford downloaded like thousands and thousands of syllabi from the leading universities, and they coded where different disciplines are ideologically, right? And economics and political science and statistics, which do the most kind of actual prediction, and they're most engaged with the real world, they end up right in the middle and with widespread, right? So yes, it's true, the humanities, way to the left, narrow spread, right? But the people kind of engaged in policy, like people like Joanne, they call them as they see them. Because if you don't call them as they see them, you're not going to get it right. The other reason why I think we want to move away from like, share your story. And I think people do need to share their story and people need to feel safe. but this is a fabulous book by Hugo Mercier and Dan Sperber. We tend to think, and I thought this until and I think everybody thought this until like in the last 15, 20 years as we've learned more about cognitive psychology, is that we tend to come to initial opinions through emotion. This is also Danny Kahneman, who unfortunately recently passed away. Danny and I always talk about you have this kind of like type 1 thinking that's kind of immediate, right? So our emotion, we kind of lead with emotion, and then we use our powers of logic to kind of like make sure, like, what he calls type 2 thinking, to sort out what's really true and what's not true. Well, the difficulty is if you have people wed them to their idea, if you say, this is me and this is my idea, then you're tying their idea to themselves. And the whole goal here is not for me to tell someone what the truth is but for us to collectively improve our thinking. And if step 1 is to tie yourself to what you're thinking emotionally and to tie your identity to what you're thinking, you're making the game a lot harder. So a friend of mine actually has this thing where she has this giant circle on her desk that is a picture of herself, and it's just this little coaster that says my ideas. And every day she just moves her ideas off the giant coaster of herself, right? Because she's bigger than her ideas and she wants her ideas to be better, but she's got to separate herself from her ideas. So the point is we can't carve nature at its joints, right? If you look at this is like an old view of the economy, like you can just break things into different industries. But instead, like the economy, this is some wonderful work by my friends Ricardo Harzman and Cesar Hidalgo. These industries have these just really elaborate supply chains, right? So one of the things that was mentioned, I recently joined Brookings, and then the person who hired me left, which is great. But one thing that I just found super fun is, so there's these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and they're lying. There's actually 16 because the 17th is coordinate on the other 16. I always say there's 16, people get mad, but there's 17. But anyways, even more amazing, there's 169 targets, right? And 247 indicators of those targets. So when you think about zero hunger, what a target is like, we want like fewer than 10% of children to be malnourished. And then there's measures or indicators of what malnourished means, okay? So right now you should be going, okay, this is a lot, right? And there's scorecards, like for every country and every one of these things, how they're doing in each of the 17. And this, I'm just giving you the 17, but there's also the full breakdown into 247. And so here is just one of them is responsible consumption. So here's a map showing all the interdependencies between responsible consumption and the other SDGs. So this is why like complexity has become this big thing, because like you can't just solve these one at a time. This is why interdisciplinary scholarship is so important. But I love this graph because there's a star, little asterisk by it. The asterisk is a footnote, and the asterisk says, this visualization is to stimulate discussion and is not a comprehensive overview. So then it's like, I'm going to go home now, right? Because it's like, wow, okay, the world is incredibly complex. But let's think about how, as a modern university and as a society, we cope with that. So here's one of my favorites. This is from the British government, the Foresight Group, and they were asked to study obesity, and they solved it. There it is. Then you want to get your phone out, take that photo. There it is. And what's so fabulous, but this is every one of these arrows, and whoever drew this graph, it's brilliant, but every one of these arrows is a gold standard study showing, A affects B. But I'll drill in on this right here. Each one of these boxes has a different color, and some are media, some are social, some are psychological, some are economic, some are food, right? So what you can think of is, this is in some sense why we can't silo a university, why our 100 departments all have to talk to one another, because big questions, whether it's climate, whether it's obesity, whether it's child education, whether it's infrastructure, anything, you can draw these same sorts of big maps. And you can color code the boxes, and those boxes by discipline or expertise. And what you need to think about is how can we then do it? So I'm going to totally age myself here. So when I was at Michigan, we had these things, these computer punch out cards, right? And like for fun, you'd just steal one from someone's deck, right? But as an economist, when you ask me to look at something like obesity, I have like my economist, people say people looking through different windows. I think actually what's going on is we literally have like disciplinary computer cards that we put over that giant network, And I only look at the ones that are colored economics. And if we have a sociologist, they look at the ones that are covered sociology. So I may be looking at things like income, right? I may be looking at accessibility to food. The sociologist may be looking at something like, you know, religion. It may be looking at kind of like family structure, things like that that an economist wouldn't care about. And then there might be a medical person who has a completely different set of boxes. Now, there's this fancy terminology that people use called a Markov boundary, which is essentially this. If I want to know what's going on with A in that giant network, I really only have to worry about the things that are coming into A and going out of A, right? So that helps me a little bit, right? So you typically just kind of like put your microscope on a part of that big graph. But here's what's kind of fascinating. Suppose I wrote this paper. I wrote this paper with Elaine Landemore, who wrote this fabulous new book on kind of citizen assemblies, and she did her dissertation at Harvard based on the work that Lou Hong and I had done. And I still don't know. Harvard's a strange place. I might have been on her committee. I'm not sure. I mean, I was at the defense. I gave feedback, but Harvard's got weird things about who can be on committees. But Elaine and I wrote this paper together about what we call positive dissensus, about this kind of idea. And we were presenting it at a conference, and someone asked me, and they said, Scott, I don't understand this part. And I said, well, I don't either. Elaine wrote that. She goes, oh, I don't understand that either. And so it was beautiful because it was like we had clearly collectively thought of something that neither of us fully understood. But here's what we did understand. Suppose I, as an economist, realize when I run my regressions, and I've done surveys, like if Joanne were here, this is the kind of thing she does, and I've got measures from like child health surveys that lack of self-control actually plays a big role in weight gain. This is something that economists take as a given, right? It's kind of like whether you're conscientious, whether you have grit, these sorts of things, right? So we just take that as like an exogenous variable, okay? But if I brought a sociologist in and a medical person in, they would say, well, stress leads to lack of self-control. And lead in the water is a huge cause, right, of lack of self-control. And then if I bring in everybody and we have a longer discussion, then everybody realize, okay, wait, violence leads to lack of self-control. Cognitive overload leads to stress. Poverty leads to cognitive. And so now, as I kind of expand that Markov boundary a little, because I think about what I have to know, you realize that like, if I leave the economist alone, she's going to be wrong. If I leave the sociologist alone, they're going to be wrong. If I leave the medical person alone, they're going to be wrong, right? The only way we can get to these solutions is by having people who kind of like, work across these things. And so there's been big projects on this IARPA. I was involved in this, was trying to like figure out, okay, what's going to happen? They want to see, could groups of experts be better at kind of predicting the world than people in the intelligence community? And the answer was yes, by a lot, it turns out. But what happened is Phil Tetlock, going back to the Fox's Hedgehogs guy, he found that like the key was there were like 7 teams. Phil's team took first, my team took third. And Phil focused on spotting talent and training. And so this was giving him kind of like a 50% lift. And then my team focused on teaming and aggregating, which gave us like a 35% lift, which is kind of like why he beat us 50 to 35. But then when we combine us, since these were different things, we got this giant lift. And the reason I put this slide up after the previous one is this aggregation thing is not just a simple averaging like the weights. Remember I talked about like talking through your models. You really have to have these long discussions like, as a sociologist, this is what I think. As a public health person, this is what I think, and really get at the meat of these issues to make advancements. Now, everything, I felt like I edited this journal called Collective Intelligence, and I felt like, okay, we had a grip on this, and then like this happened, right? And it's worth understanding how this happened. So there's a young woman scientist who created this thing called ImageNet that then became this giant thing. So there's a bunch of images, and you had to classify these. And so this was a big competition, and there was a certain types of algorithms that were winning. And to explain kind of what these things are, so this is kind of an alpha version of this. Like, is it a Chihuahua or is it a muffin, right? Or is it a Labrador or a bagel, right? I mean, I'm not joking. These are the sort of the Chihuahua muffin test, harder than you think, but could be hard for AI. And so what had happened is in 2010, 2021, classification errors were 28%, 26%. So it's just been going down like 1-2% a year. And all of a sudden, 2012, it dropped to 16%. And what happened is people, this is when these sort of, what these neural net things suddenly came in. Jeffrey Hinton, who won the Nobel Prize for this, right? So all of a sudden, massive breakthrough. And so what happened at this point was then Zuckerberg, Musk, Microsoft, they all just started going to computer science conferences and offering baseball salaries, literally, right? I mean, like that we just couldn't even begin to match, right? So we lost, good people here. So what happened? And shows like Jason Way is this. It's complicated, but there's a great paper on this. And essentially, what happened is, if you look at this graph, you see these are performance graphs, and what you're looking at is like kind of like the number of bits. So it's going like, the number of parameters. So it's going 10 to the 8th, 10 to the 20th, 10 to the 24th. And these are things like, how did it do it arithmetic? How did it do it translating? How did it do it unscrambling words? How did it do it questions and answering in Persian, right? How did it do in like multitask? How did it do figure out the context of a word? And what you see is, as you increase the number of parameters, you're getting these tiny, tiny effects. And then all of a sudden, there was just what we call emergence, where suddenly it worked, right? And this is where it's kind of amazing. And one of the things that made it work, though, when they think about GPT, which means generative pre-training, is they had this thing I've circled there. There's humans in the loop that were correcting it. So like on its own, it couldn't quite do it, but there was this humans that were kind of like helping pre-train this to give us these giant jumps. Now, something that should come immediately to mind is that AI works very differently than we do, because I don't have 10 to the 24th parameters in my head. I probably have 4. So what's happening here? So one thing they did is, this is some work by a friend of mine, Mark Stivers. He took a test that was easier for humans than AI to do. And the red line at the top is kind of performance for an individual human, and the one below it is 2 humans. All the blue lines, the first few blue lines, are AI programs. So humans are better than AI. But the green dots are humans plus AI. So it's weird. The AI is worse than the humans, but the AI plus the human are better than the 2 humans. And it's just because the AI is so different, right? It's just different than us. And you can see that over at the top. These graphs, the graph on the right is kind of like, how similar are your ways of thinking? And so if you look at all the algorithms, they're all very similar. And the reason they're so tight is because the algorithm thinks the same way every time. Whereas if you see the red line, that's how similar are the people, right? Some people are really similar, some a little less. People are messy, right? One thing we see when you compare humans to AI is, wow, we're more interesting than they are. And then when you see humans and the AI, that's over to the left. That means again, this is a similarity graph. We're less similar. So it's just, again, the answer is, once again, diversity. And if you look at kind of like human AI synergies, this is some work that recently came out at MIT. The simplest way to explain this is the green area down in the bottom is whether the one on the right, let's do that first. In 80-some% of the cases, human plus AI did better than either it didn't take last, right? So it either took second or won. And the one down at the bottom is where it did better than either one. So it actually took first place. What you end up getting is that like 47% of the time, human plus AI was better than humans or AI across 200 studies, right? When you're doing that same paired comparison. Got to be dubious about be open and questioning about this, because of the fact that the AI is getting faster all the time. This is just 200 sample problems, right? Somebody could do another study with 200 different sample problems tomorrow. But what you are seeing across the board is this notion of there do appear to be synergies between humans and AI. There's also been some concern. This was a paper that came out last year that got a lot of buzz about AI all thinking the same. And so they ask AI, so great, give me a metaphor for time. 203 different AI programs. 203 AI programs all said, time is like a river. Every one of them. Every one. Right? And so not good, right? And so then, but luckily there's people at Columbia, there's other faculty members who figure things out. And they're like, okay, wait, what could we do something to kind of like help people get better? So what you can do, I'll just jump ahead because these slides are easier to see. What you can do is you can first start out by saying, look, here's humans and here's AI. Here's kind of how diverse they are. Humans are more diverse because the AI is all saying it's like a river. But then what you do is you basically tell the LLM, for the 203 different versions of the LLM, you say to some of them, you're a young woman who lives in the desert. She's not going to say time is like a river because she doesn't know what a river is, right? So what you do is you weirdly like make the AI kind of like people, and then the AI becomes more diverse, kind of like people, okay? But the previous study that I kind of jumped through, what you get from that is that when people use AI, because the AI does have this hive mentality, it kind of sucks the diversity out of us, right? Which is a big concern, right? Because we want our undergraduates, we want our faculty, we want people to be kind of like going in lots of directions, right? And then we want to interrogate it. And so I'm going to go back to this thing about ideas meriting respectful engagement followed by interrogation. If one of the things we do, if we rely too much on AI during the kind of like just brainstorming part of things, we can suck that diversity out. Most diversity, and this is the thing, like, if I'm looking at this for like 20 years, is wrong, is bad. It doesn't work. But the thing is, but if we don't have it, we can't get the good idea, right? And so it's sometimes it's a basic evolutionary argument, right? You need variation and you need selection. And to the extent that the AI is wiping out the variation, it's a concern. Okay. All right. So let me stop there. I mean, I think one reason I'm super proud to be here and happy to be here at this time is I think Michigan's thinking about AI appropriately. I also think that we have a lot of universities, like I was at Northwestern, I went to Wisconsin for my master's, then Northwestern, and then at Caltech. Caltech and MIT have basically, and Northwestern to an extent, have taken an approach of like narrowing, being very, very good on a handful of things, right? Both Northwestern and MIT recently announced AI degrees. Michigan is continuing we're going to be really good. We're going to try and be really good at 110 things. And I think that's a good strategy. All right. Thank you very, very much. I'm happy to answer questions. I have 90 more slides if anybody wants it. Yeah.
So I got one quick question.
Okay.
Since you were talking about AI and there's all these different AI programs out there, ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, whatever.
Yeah.
What's the best?
Yeah. So it varies, right? So if you're doing like, this is going to sound like a really geeky answer, but there's some things like Python coding, like most people program in this language called Python. And so there's just all sorts of stuff on the web about coding in Python. And so Claude from Anthropic really kind of focused on that, downloading it in. So if you're doing any sort of computer programming, Claude is just spectacular, right? So a lot of our graduate students use that. Typically, the Notebook LLM is something that a lot of students are doing. So what Notebook LLM, what students can do is they can download all of the materials from class, right? And then you can say, give me a quiz, give me an easy quiz, give me a hard quiz, give me 200 note cards to study for the exam, right? So it can do all of that. It's better at that than ChatGPT. Like ChatGPT, it's just a lot better kind of like from a file management standpoint, because you know exactly what's in there and it's only pulling things from that. I think ChatGPT is still probably best kind of like, overall, kind of like just general expression. But I think most people feel like it's really important to have separate conversations. It's also tricky because I guess Bob Axelrod is a National Medal of Science winner from U of M. He and I just sort of wrote a paper, hopefully it'll get published, on sycophancy, right? And one of the concerns with not only kind of dictators and government leaders and CEOs surrounding themselves by people who just say, yes, I agree with you, AI is also very sycophantic, right? It's really difficult for it to say something negative, right? It tends to like kind of like corroborate every choice. Although I will say, my wife and I got a chance to go teach in Africa 3 years ago, and it's our 30th anniversary. And so for our 30th anniversary, I bought her this really cool leather hippo footstool, right? Because we watched these hippos outside of this tent we were staying in Africa. And so I put it into ChatGPT. I said, my wife is a professor. Here's her profile. It's our 30th anniversary. Is a leather hippo footstool a good idea? And it was like, run away, run away. But it turned out to be a very good idea. So, and my younger son was like, ChatGPT is a hater. So yeah, so they're good, but I think the general impression on the campus is that different tools work very well for very different things. Yeah, go ahead.
Hold on, need to get the mic.
All right, got to get mics.
Our online can't hear you.
Could AI be one of the participants in a group where you have other people that are different in the group too? And then you would have that opinion, but it'd be one of many. And my second question is, well, with the current political situation right now, do you think that the understanding of the word diversity is more about race than the multitude of things that you've explained?
Yeah, so first on that, when we think about AI in the room, there's two ways you can think about it. One is you can think of AI just as an agent, right? Like as a separate person, and you can have AI as part of the conversation. And a lot of organizations do that. Microsoft, in some of their units, before you make a proposal to your team, you'll have to run it by AI just to see like other flaws in it. There's a second, Jeff Mulgan at UCL, who was co-editor of Collective Intelligence with me, the journal. He was questioning a lot whether government bodies should have like fact-checking AI in real time. So like if I'm saying something like on my screen, it would be like, Scott, that's incorrect, right? and then I would get like 10 seconds to fix it. And then if I don't, everybody else would get on their screen, Scott is incorrect, right? So, but then there's a third level, which is that, and you can just, if you type in Scott Page into Google and then type everything everywhere all at once, one of the things that can be done, which is just kind of mind-boggling, if we have a faculty meeting or any sort of meeting with like 60 people that lasts an hour, be snarky here, maybe 25 minutes of content in that hour. Now with AI, what you can do, and there's multiple companies in this space, is you can ask everybody to just speak for 10 minutes about what they think is important prior to the meeting. So 70 people times 10 minutes, that's 700 minutes of content before the meeting ever starts. And in the 30 seconds it takes them to walk down the hall, the AI can create one of those graphs like I just showed you, right? And in addition, you can then have people kind of like comment on the graph. Like you can then say, okay, I'm showing you this part of the graph. Do you agree with it? Is something missing? And you can have everybody in real time do 700 minutes of analysis on the graph. So now I've only taken 20 minutes of the meeting and I've got 1,400 minutes of content, right? Thoughtful content. So there's a question of, can we rethink all of democracy, right? Can we rethink every institution? Can we rethink every organizational structure, given that there's this capacity, right? So Michael Barr, who probably spoke in this group in the past, who was the dean of the public policy school, is now in the FOMC, right? As is Lisa Cook from Ann Arbor, Michigan State. If you take something like the Federal Reserve, they've got 600 economists. There's no reason they couldn't all be at the meeting. I mean, and so if during the discussion it comes up that they're talking about, rare earth minerals, and no one who's setting interest rates knows anything about that, and I happen to know something about that, I don't. But if I did, my screen would start like blinking, saying, Scott, you might get pulled into the meeting. And the AI would just decide they knew nothing, and I knew something could pull me. So this idea of kind of like adaptive representation, like it's a whole new world. Second question, which is a different pivot, is like, diversity is an issue in terms of how it gets phrased, right? And when you look at, and it also is what matters in the very pragmatic case of like figuring out good policies, advancing science, coming up with solutions, is people who understand and think of things in different ways, right? And what are the causes of that? And people tend to put those in three buckets, but those things are interdependent, right? They depend on education, right? Like, what have you studied? They depend on your life experiences. And our life experiences are really filtered through our identities, our families, where we grew up, those sorts of things, the social media content we get, and people from different kind of classic identity groups in terms of like race, gender, those sorts of things. We read different things, we watch different movies, we read different books, right? And so, I mean, I would joke about this to the extent you can joke about anything at Fort Meade, right? But I would joke that, like, if you're trying to understand people who want to like blow things up and overthrow the government, you probably don't want to fill your room with people who went to Choate and Princeton, right? Now, you know what I mean? You want people who are coming from places that are rougher and people who've got some anger, right? So I think there's going to be domains where, like, if I want to understand, you know, politics in America, I need people from different places, geographically from different places. I need people of different races, genders, religions, you know, all sorts of stuff, right? If I'm doing chemistry, it may be the actual process of the chemistry may not depend that much on identity diversity, but the question you ask may, right? And so I think I mean, my take on this is we want to be thoughtful across all domains and think about where it might matter. I think the one thing though that I would add on the identity stuff that's been a little bit unfortunate is that, you know, having been in this space for a long time, like I was originally a mathematician, right? And you'll meet people who are mathematicians from groups of people who typically have been underrepresented as mathematicians, and they will say, like, the great thing about America is that they were able to be mathematicians here. Like, this is what they could do. This is what they loved. This is who they are. And that regardless of what they look like here, they could be that person. And so I think that, to the extent that in the current political climate, the fact that the language is in some ways potentially excluding people. I mean, look, so I've got all these fancy titles and stuff. There's very little in my skill set that would have done well in Yankee Springs, Michigan. We had a gas station. I'd be working at that gas station, right? And so I think, you know, so much of this is opportunity. Yeah.
So we have 20 to 30-year-olds. What do you think AI is going to do for them, to them? I asked a 16-year-old the other day, I said, so you use ChatGPT. What do you use it for? She says, well, it does my homework.
Yeah.
So where's the critical thinking? Where's the learning? Where's the importance of being a human being?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, so I have two of those things, those 20-year-old things, and they're I always joke that they're taller, better looking, and nicer and smarter, and now they're even smarter, right? I think that, you know, the challenge for them, and when I, you know, talk to them and I talk to my undergraduate students, is that, you know, like when I was an undergrad, like the generation before me did a lot of multiplication and division in college. I inverted a lot of matrices, right? And students don't do any of that now. I think the question is, you know, what are we having them do, right? And so what skill sets are really going to matter? And, you know, we're having a lot of discussion about that. I mean, so when it first dropped, I'll be a little bit snarky. When it first dropped, there were people saying, oh my God, like students are going to cheat. And there were a set of us that were saying, okay, if the car and the light bulb were invented at the same time, it is true, kids would get in cars, drive to places, turn on light bulbs, and cheat. That would happen. But there's probably larger social benefits from the car and the light bulb than the student. Like, so let's keep our eyes on what's really, you know, what's important. I think that, yes, it is the case that students can use this to get things done. And so then what you have to do is you have to think about how can I, and this is where I think we're all kind of contorting ourselves in a weird way. How do I come up with assignments and challenges and curricula that engage them, that enable them to use this in, you know, super creative ways? And Michigan faculty are just astounding. Part of the reason I led with Mark Newman thing, I mean, like one of the things that, you know, investing in, I think that weirdly, even though AI is getting smarter, investing in really good faculty matters a lot, right? Because they're really at the forefront of how do we use this. Some stuff's going to get a lot faster. Some stuff's going to get a lot better. I think that a lot of this though is getting getting the undergrads to have the right mindset, right? Because there's a mindset of these kids are so achievement focused. Like to get into U of M now, they feel like they couldn't have made a mistake. So they're very grade conscious. They're very focused. So there is a mindset about how can I use this to get A's so I can get to the next thing. The real challenge is getting them to shift away from that and think about, what do I need to look like? What do I need to think like? How do I think of this as something that augments me, that's useful? And how do I maintain agency? Right? Here's a big question. People like yourselves, people who went to Michigan, people who are sitting in this room, you've had wonderful lives. You've had good health, you've had good marriages, you've raised good families, you've had good careers, you've economically done well. And we know the economists, sociologists, psychologists know the predictors of that, but we don't know whether that comes down to every day you just made better choices. What's the T.S. Eliot, 100 choices before the tasting of toast and tea or whatever, right? And the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Maybe every day, every one of those 100 choices, you were just a little bit better than people who've kind of struggled. Or it could be that you didn't buy the house with the wet basement. I mean, it could be that you just really avoided the really stupid decision. That could be the reason. And we don't really know. And that's a profound question when it comes to AI because people are losing agency, right? They're letting AI make choices for them. And it could be that we actually want AI to be making big choices for people or helping on big choices. And it could be that we don't want it on the little ones. However, it could be for some people, we do want them to be using it more. Like I was at that grocery store the other day and the guy in front of me, this is up in Pinckney, won $100 with a lottery ticket and then did what? Bought 100 lottery tickets. I'm like, no. And I wish his phone would have said no, right? So this is a balance we're trying to figure out. There's a whole nudging literature, there's parentalism, but how do we think about how do we use this to make people's lives better? I think that's the question, and that's where we're trying to steer our students, not just them, but everyone. Yeah.
You. This is fascinating. The question I have is about the current discussion going on in Washington with the military and the Pentagon, and which AI firm they're
Anthropic,
going to partner with. Some of that sounds, based on what you've said, to be it's good they're having the discussion, and at the same time, I'm not sure the best intelligence in Washington is making that decision. I mean, AI has entitled a lot how do you think about that?
I honestly don't know how to think about it, right? I think these things are also the versions we're getting aren't necessarily the version that the Defense Department's getting. It's also not clear what information is being downloaded. I worry a bit. Paul Caron, who was provost here and ran the libraries here, when we did the Google downloading everything in, Michigan demanded a copy of all the books online. And Google says, well, why? We'll hold on to it. We've got it here at Google. And Paul says, what about when you go bankrupt? And they all laughed, right? But 23andMe, which was founded by the wife of one of the founders of Google, did go bankrupt. And all of a sudden, all of our DNA was for sale, right? And so one of the things that you want to think about here is, and I think the government needs to think really carefully about, is what information are they giving to Anthropic, and how does that get firewalled, right? And what information does Anthropic need to know in order to be giving them good advice? And not to be overly political, but I know for my wife and I, the young girls that were killed by the bomb in Iran, you just think they're swing sets. You could, and you could argue, oh, they put fake swing sets outside of a military compound or something, but the AI should have been better there. We shouldn't be. And so there's a sense in which when you look at this, you think this should save human lives. This should, in wartime, peacetime, traffic jam. There should be all sorts of ways this can be incredibly useful, right? I'm not a good driver, and my car lets me know that every 45 seconds, right? And that's a good thing, right? And so I think the real challenge is the government has to think about, you know, how much information do they want to have, should they have for our personal freedoms, and how can they use it to make, how can they use it so the government can carry out their activities much better, right? This is tangential to what you said, but one thing that, like, friends of mine who are more interested in ethics feel like the tax code has become a game where we all cheat, and so, like, not kind of getting as much as you can on your taxes is almost un-American, right? And there could be ways with AI that, like, our taxes are just kind of like automatically assessed, right? Or somehow where it's just we de-gamify it in a way. But then how do you make that work so that it's not invading my privacy? And so this is where I think it's easy to be critical of, either administration, and I kind of was initially. Like, neither Democrats or Republicans are very good at predicting the world. And so that means almost by definition, they can't be that good at making policies. But collections of them can, I think, but I think you really need thoughtful people from a lot of, I think you need ethicists, and I think you need sociologists, and I think you need human computer interface people. I think you need technology. I think you need a lot of people. What worries me is, I know a lot of the people, my son's in the AI space, and I don't think they're representative of us, of everyone, of anyone, right? It's a very special group of people.
Any final questions? Raise your hand.
One last question.
One last
This is it.
one.
Right. No pressure.
Just to follow up on that, the whole question of how much of my information do I want to put in this machine that somehow some person with bad intent might make use of it. And here you have a company that has told the government, we don't trust you to have the ability to surveil everyone in the country. And as I do my Google Mail, they pop this little Google AI thing up in the corner, which they want me to use. And I think about it. Do I want to do that or not? And what's being done or what can be done to put proper safety controls on the whole system?
Well, this is a great question. Let's go back to that, that futuristic vision I gave of everybody giving their 10 minutes and then all the ideas surfacing, right? I think we actually need, deep civic discussions across the country, across communities, thinking about, what do these companies have the right to scrape? I think there's all sorts of concerns, and you should have them, that, they can capture my voice, they can capture all my phrasing. So I can say to it, write this in my style. Like, Gmail just writes emails for me if I want it. And so the fact that it could, like, be pretending to be my son and desperately needing DoorDash food or something, right? And and you just send this. I think a lot of stuff like that is really dangerous, right? And I think we all have, and so the thing that I was at a conference on, this interdisciplinary workshop on reimagining democracy in other institutions. Like, so how can we use these technologies? Because think about it, like, our democracy functions the same way it did when we were riding on horseback to some extent, right? We have 3 judge panels because that's how far they could go by horse, right? Maybe we could do better. But the concern is that societies work through trust, punishment, and forgiveness, right? We have to trust. But if you aren't trustworthy, you have to suffer consequences. But then we also have to forgive at some level, right? Because otherwise we'd all be in jail, right? So there's got to be some forgiveness built in. This is just straight Hannah Arendt, intro political science. You can't punish it. No punish. So how do you trust? That's the question, right? I mean, and so, there's been a bunch of studies where you, like, let bots loose to set prices for gas, and they start colluding, They just figure it out. Who's sending them to jail? What is AI jail? Right? I mean, so the inability to punish then limits our ability to trust, right? And if trust is an enormous predictor of GDP, growth, happiness, safety, crime, all sorts of things. And so that, I think, you've hit one of the real key issues. How do we create a culture of trust with entities that we can't, we have no way of creating incentives for them because they can just replicate themselves. I'm not happy. No, but I think that, but then I think, this is where, I think we have to be the adults in the room, right? And we have to have real conversations about this, and we have to demand of our, political leadership and of our, and from these companies that there's somehow some way of building in responsibility. All right. Thank you very, very much. This was Big Cleanse. Speaking of trust, I almost stole your computer, but I won't.
You can keep the water. That's it. Thank you very much for your thoughtful talk. And don't forget, our next meeting here is not on the normal second Thursday of the month. It is April 2nd. So please make a note on your phone or however you keep track of your time. Thank you very much for coming, everybody.